Good evening, I'm Will Gardner, your host for After Hours, a program where we discuss this week's happenings in the North Dakota State legislative session. Good evening and welcome to After Hours. Tonight, Shane Goettle is joining us. Shane is the former USDA Rural Development Chief of Staff, former Commissioner of the Department of Commerce, and the State Director of Senator John Hoeven. He was also a candidate for the Interim Chamber of Commerce, Higher Ed, and as well as the U.S. House. Currently, Shane is serving as the Director of Public Relations, the Director of Public Affairs at ODNI, and tonight he's here because he's an attorney representing as well several cities in western North Dakota. Shane, thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you, Will.
Whenever there's talk of money, it gets pretty interesting. And
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people that have a lot of interest in what's going on, and there is, to the tune of $1 billion, there is a fund set aside for development of western North Dakota, especially infrastructure in the western part of the state. The process has started originally with a group of senators from the West, or I guess legislators, I'll just say it that way, from the West that had come up with what they called the surge bill. Mm-hmm. In the other side of the coin, we had the governor had come up with his budget, and I guess they're calling it the Jump Start. Can you differentiate between those two bills?
Sure. Well, you're absolutely right. Let me just set the stage, though, and say that for the audience to understand that in the past decade with oil development in North Dakota, we've had well over 100,000 people that are now calling North Dakota home. Okay, that's not counting the temporary employees. That's the numbers we see in the estimated census data. These are people who have now become North Dakota citizens, 100,000 people. The city of Minot is only 50,000 people. So we've had a population twice the size of the city of Minot come into this state, and that's pretty significant. What do those people need? Well, they need infrastructure, and so they need water and sewer. They need roads, and that's the kind of things that we're funding with these two approaches: the surge bill and the Jump Start bill. Now, the Jump Start bill has kind of died already in the Senate. It was a plan that the governor had put together, and it was mainly dealing with some of the big cities, as well as our Department of Transportation and law enforcement, and some incentives for low-income housing. That has been pieced apart and put into other places, and so what survives out of the Senate is a surge bill that provides just over $1 billion right now in funding to not just western North Dakota, but also counties and cities outside of western North Dakota. But predominantly, the thrust of it is to get at the infrastructure challenges that many of the counties and cities in western North Dakota are experiencing.
So, and now the Senate has passed quite substantially and quite quickly, 44-2, they passed that surge bill. Now it's in the House. Is there there is a little bit of, not resistance, but I guess people want to take due diligence, have a little due diligence on, hey, not so fast here with $1 billion. Let's figure out where this is all going. I believe it was Representative Jeff Delzer from Underwood who kind of was the one who kind of stuck his neck out the most and said, hey, can you at least explain where some of this money is coming from? There was some kickback saying, hey, we've already shown you this. We've already told you where all this money is going for. And so now, do you think it was disingenuous at all from what he was asking, or do you think, was there anything more than his request that the cities had not already explained, or can you talk about that?
I wouldn't use the word disingenuous at all. I think he was very earnest in trying to understand what the money would be deployed for. Remember, this bill was crafted largely in the Senate, and so the Senate and those that worked on it, including Majority Leader Rich Wardner and Senator Kelly Armstrong and a few others, they understood and did the homework on this for months leading up to the introduction of this bill in the Senate. I think there are some on the House side who haven't spent that kind of time on this. And so they have some fundamental questions. How are you going to spend the money? Where will it go? I think they're exercising their responsibility to be good stewards of these dollars. What they heard in the hearing from the counties was that largely it's going to go to roads. And the counties under this bill are going to have to build up their roads to 105.5, which means that they're able to withstand and be maintained for this kind of truck traffic that we're seeing in western North Dakota. And the cities came in and they talked about lagoon systems, and they talked about new developments and water and sewer needs to maintain their present systems, as well as the tentacles that need to be built out to support new housing for the workers that are here. And finally, we heard about some of the needs for their own city streets and to build out to these developments. I mean, that's what you heard. When those responses came back in, that's what you see.
But I mean, everyone knows now that there's been a drop on the oil front. So obviously, I guess the big question on my mind and probably a lot of people's minds, okay, so now in light of this shift downward, you know, you don't want to talk about it's always going to stay down, but you have to face the reality of right now there's a drop in production and productivity. How does that affect the surge bill and is that playing into people's minds?
There's two things I would say about that. The first is to understand where the money for the surge is coming from. That's actually money that's been built up. It's cash right now that the state has. It's been built up from the formula funding, both the extraction tax and the production tax.
That's not the legacy fund.
It's not the legacy fund, no. This is after everything else has been funded, there's been a fund at the bottom of the buckets, if you will, through which this extraction tax and production tax money flows. And that bucket is filled up to the tune of about $1 billion that's available for this kind of thing. So it's cash. We're not looking at future earnings or future taxes of the state. These are dollars the state has right now to be able to deploy for this need. So the funding isn't affected by any future concerns about oil production at this point. It is a concern in the production formula, but with regard to the surge funding, it's not. The surge funding is designed for capital construction projects in the 2015 construction season. That's why there's a big push to get the bill passed early.
Yeah, and that was my other question is, it was evident that the Senate wanted to get this out of the Senate and into the House as quickly as possible to get the ball moving.
Yes.
In order to get more, to get these projects started and get ready to go.
Because the communities, right now we have a formula bill, but it expires on June 30th. And so the communities say, look, if we want to take full advantage of a construction season, we need resources to be able to go out and bid. And they have to bid now if they're going to get in place the engineering and the construction that needs to be completed this year. So this is 2015 dollars. Yeah. And the questions that you mentioned that Chairman Delzer sent out to the counties and the cities, he was asking that fundamental question: can you spend this money?
Right. Well, and
the community said yes, we can.
I didn't want to beat a dead horse, but you did bring it up. I mean, Representative Delzer is bringing up some points about where is this money going to be spent. It shouldn't be so difficult, in my mind, that they find or they tell us where the money is going to be spent, because if there is such a push,
yes, every one of these counties and cities has a plan about how they're going to spend that money. And in fact, most of them would say there's not enough money there to fund our entire plan. They would all say that. But they have, I think, demonstrated during the hearing in response to the questions that they have very good, solid plans to spend this money on roads and water and sewer and streets. And that's predominantly where most of this money is going to go.
I know that we don't have the opportunity to talk tonight to Representative Delzer, but do you believe that have you spoken with him? Do you believe that his concerns have been addressed, that his questions have been answered as far as other members of legislators? I
think all the counties and cities did a great job responding to his questions and laying out their case. I think he's going to obviously take a look at it, and he's got an entire committee consisting of almost, it's not quite 30 people, but 30 representatives. It's a big committee. They're all going to take a look at this and see if they have any remaining questions that we'll have to answer. My work on behalf of a few of the cities out there is partly doing that.
Which cities, Shane?
Yeah, I've been helping the cities of Minot, Stanley, Parshall, and Newtown in their preparation for the hearing and making their case to the legislature. I actually work as an assistant city attorney for each of those cities and specifically helping them with infrastructure challenges.
There's no way that this is going to get caught up. It's just a matter of how it's coming together, right? There's no sense that there's going to be any issue of not being able to pass this surge.
We're going to pass some kind of surge bill out of this legislature, I think. The question is, what will the ultimate funding level be? Right. There's about $300 million in there for counties. That's predominantly going to go to roads. There's over $350 million in there for the cities in those big, what we call the Big 10 counties, plus the hub cities. The hub cities are mine at Dickinson and Williston, and then there's also Watford City has a special place in here too because it's been ground zero. And then the rest of the dollars are for counties and cities outside of that area, that have impacts, but they're not immediate. You mentioned the price of oil. There's another angle that I wanted to hit that because I talked about the cash,
right,
and how we're supposed to fund this. Remember that while we'll see some reduced drilling activity, we already have, that drilling activity is going to be consolidated into some of the most viable fields. One of them is the partial field in Mountrail County, and the other is the Neeson Anticline, which runs into McKenzie County and Dunn in that area. So while the drilling may decrease in some parts of the state, we actually may see some increases in some areas. The initial phase of this was moving rigs around to get one well in and hold the lease. And now we've got a lot of infield drilling where you drill and you drill out one direction, but then you just move the rig on the pad and you drill out another direction on that same pad. And so you'll get maybe 8 wells, for example, on one pad. We expect that that's going to continue.
Right.
And that especially in some of these areas like in Mountrail County, McKenzie County, they may not see a slowdown at all.
Okay. Now, are there any, I wouldn't say battle lines drawn, that's a little bit harsh, because I do believe that all North Dakota is together really on this issue, but even Republicans and Democrats, would you say that's the case here? Is there anyone
Well, take a look at the Senate vote.
East and West,
The Senate vote was there's only 2 votes
right,
opposing this, and not because I don't even think those 2 votes are necessarily opposed to more infrastructure for Western North Dakota. So that was bipartisan, and it was East and West. So there's a real consensus that's developed around this.
If there is a hang-up on where the money's proportion, can you tell us where there would be some hang-ups where people are dragging their feet a little more or more gung-ho, where everyone is more aligned? Obviously, it looks like the highway budget is something that's just a brain-dead. That seems like a pretty simple.
Yeah, I think that there's a balancing act going on about how much does the state need for its highway system this construction season. How much do we need to get out in these dollars this construction season? I don't think anybody questions the need. The need is there. I just think that even with $1 billion, there are competing priorities, and you have to manage that and say, are there other priorities that need to be funded with these funds? We're trying to make the case that the biggest priority right now for Western North Dakota is to get the roads and the water and the sewer and the streets and all of this infrastructure put into play and take advantage of this construction season, especially right now, because as we've seen some of the drilling activity recede, the contract bids, we actually might save some money if we can get out now because the contractors are busy looking for work. If we can get out and bid this spring, we know that bids historically come in lower in the spring than they do later in the summer. And so there are cost-saving reasons and reasons to take advantage of maybe the labor pool that's looking for work and get this done. Commodity prices will come back. This drilling activity is going to continue for a very long time. We've got people living here already calling North Dakota home, and they're still looking for new housing developments to live in. Right. And safe streets to drive on.
So you don't see this being any time soon that we're slowing down. It's at least going to stay around that $50 mark is what you.
I think it appears that we've settled in that arena, but even some of the experts are saying that somehow by the year's end, we're going to bounce back out of this. This is obviously filled with geopolitical considerations. Any instability in the Middle East could cause prices to come roaring right back. And as the refining capacity comes online around the world, depending on what the U.S. does with export policy in this crude arena, any of those factors could come into play.
How does XL pipeline affect this at all as far as infrastructure? Is there? I believe the XL misses North Dakota. It just nicks it in the bottom southwest corner, right? It doesn't But is there any?
Well, leaders like our U.S. senators and the governor have been promoting that pipeline because
Right, Senator Hogan
because
just
we
today.
could take 100,000 barrels a day of North Dakota crude into that pipeline, and it helps alleviate some of the congestion in other arenas. If we get a pipeline flowing that way, then that means there's less avenues, there's more avenues basically to move crude from Canada in the U.S. And I think it's a good policy overall, because if we can have North American energy, I won't say independence, I really think it's about energy security. It's about having, we export and import food all the time in this country, but we're food secure.
Okay.
Same thing with energy. We'll export and import energy, but we need to be energy secure, and I think that's what that's about.
Shane, thank you for talking to me tonight.
Absolutely.
Very important topic, and we will see you next time on After Hours.